Welcome, World History. This is Unit 5.7, the Scientific Revolution. And what we need to understand is that before 1500, scholars had generally decided that what was true or false referred to the Bible or to an ancient Greek or Roman author. Europeans basically didn't challenge the scientific ideas of the church or of ancient thinkers. They just said, well, that's what they've said, so I just believe it. I accept it. And they never really started changing it. But during the Middle Ages, most scholars started to move past this. They began to question. They were curious, and the Reformation encouraged Christians to accept new ways of thinking about God and salvation. And so we see a few scholars who start publishing works that will challenge what the ancient thinkers said, as well as the church. And this starts changing European thought, but also starts causing some problems, especially with the church. Now, during the Middle Ages, most scholars believed that the earth was this immovable object that was in the center of the universe. And according to the belief, the moon, the sun, and the planets all moved in circular paths around the earth. And common sense seemed to support this view. The sun seems to be moving around the earth. It rises in the morning, it sets in the evening. And so this was known as the geocentric theory. It's an earth center, geo being earth. So the geocentric theory is that the sun moves around the earth, that the earth is an immovable object. It's at the center of the universe. These ideas come from Aristotle, Ptolemy, and so Christianity then starts saying that God had deliberately placed the earth at the center of the universe, and therefore earth was a special place on which the great story of humanity unfolds. But people begin to challenge that. And we start seeing this challenge come about during the Renaissance, when they're traveling and looking at different things and experiencing new ways of living. And they began to question especially the geocentric theory, geocentric earth at the center of the universe. So Nicholas Copernicus, became interested that the sun was at the center of the universe and not the earth. So he comes up with what's known as heliocentric or sun-centered. Now, he knew that most scholars and clergy, church people, were going to reject his theory because it went against the religious views. So he didn't say anything. He kept it quiet, because he didn't want to be persecuted. He didn't want to be ridiculed. And so he doesn't publish these findings until actually the last year of his life, because he was scared of what was going to happen. Yet there were these two individuals, one being Tycho Brahe and the other being Johannes Kepler. And they started recording, Brahe especially was recording the movements of the planets. He had all of this data based on observation. And then you've got his assistant, who is Kepler, who is this brilliant mathematician. He continues the work. And these guys started to prove that what Copernicus was saying was true. And they weren't just saying that it was true, but they were saying that mathematically it is 100% feasible and likely that planets revolve around the sun and not the earth. That the earth is not at the center of the universe. That the geocentric theory is wrong, and it's that heliocentric theory that is correct. We see some other individuals coming in, such as Descartes, but I want to go to an Italian scientist whose name was Galileo. And he builds on these theories. He's an astronomer. He invents the telescope, and this is his way of being able to study the universe, if you will. He is able to find more information about planets and moon. He finds that the moon and the sun are not pure and perfect. But here's the thing. he supports the theories of Copernicus and starts talking about it. Whereas Copernicus kept it quiet, he starts promoting it. And Galileo's findings will frighten the Catholic and Protestant leaders, all church people, because it goes against church teaching, it goes against church authority. And here's why it's so frightening. Because the church people thought that if people believed the church was wrong about the geocentric theory, about the earth being at the center of the universe, if people believed the church were wrong about that, they could question other church teachings as well. And so in 1616, the Catholic Church basically says, Galileo, be quiet. Stop supporting Copernicus. Keep your mouth quiet. Don't say anything. And he does. He remains publicly silent. But then in 1632, he writes a book. And when he writes this book, he shows that Copernicus was right, that it's a heliocentric theory, and he supports Copernicus. The Pope gets extremely upset with Galileo. He brings him to Rome to stand trial. And as he's put on trial, he is told, either confess that you are wrong or face torture. And so to avoid torture, Galileo reads aloud a confession that he had signed in which he said that Copernicus was false. In other words, he went against what he truly believed to save his life. However, Galileo will never be a free man again. He'll live under house arrest, and he'll eventually die, but his books will still spread. It is interesting, by the way, that in 1992, yes, 1992, the Catholic Church will officially come back and say, whoops, we made a mistake. Galileo had been right all along. It is a heliocentric model and not a geocentric model. Well, with this, we start seeing that these guys were able to do it through this new approach that comes about through Francis Bacon, known as the scientific method. You're familiar with this because we talk about this all the time in school, in developing a hypothesis. What do you believe is going to happen? This critical thinking. You take a problem, you take a question, you observe it, you have this unproved assumption, and then you test it. And in the final step, you analyze and interpret your data to reach a conclusion. And it will either confirm or disprove what the hypothesis might be. And so this is when, of course, as I mentioned, we have Descartes that comes in, along with Francis Bacon also, that is a part of this as well. These guys have passionate interest in science, and they will start relying on mathematics, but also logic that can help them understand life. And then finally, we have Isaac Newton. Of course, all of us know about Newton, the great English scientist who starts to help us as it relates to the law of gravity. At the age of 26, he is certain that all physical objects are affected equally by the same forces. His great discovery was that the same force ruled motion of the planets as well as all matter on the earth and space, and it all came about through this object of gravity. And as we move forward with science, we find that the scientific revolution gives us several things. We have microscopes. We have a barometer that helps us, understand how weather works. By the way, Gabriel Fahrenheit, he's that one that makes the first thermometer that actually shows us that water freezes at 32 degrees. We'll start to get more involved in understanding human anatomy, of being able to look at the way the body works. First vaccine that Catherine the Great of Russia will take, produced by Edward Jenner for smallpox. So scientific revolution, enlightenment, all of these bring about widespread change that you and I still experience even today.